If you go to the market with a common offering, what everybody else can do, you're going to command a common price. And by doing that bumper to bumper coverage, like you were talking about, I think that's an uncommon offering. I don't think it's comparable to a firm that's charging by the hour or charging a fixed price for a defined scope of work, because there's an insurance component in there that says, if you get audited or something happens that you need us, you're covered. Don't worry about it.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and I have a special announcement. You probably noticed how we've been featuring Spotlight Thursday episodes. These include interviews with our partners and content that we feel would help you. Well, going forward, a great friend of the Successful Bookkeeper community will be hosting our Spotlight Thursday episodes. His name is Louie Prosperi. He's the former CEO of many bookkeeping organizations, including the IPBC, now CPB Canada, the ICB USA, and ICB Global. So he has incredible insight and experience in the accounting and bookkeeping industry. Today, he is interviewing value pricing expert Ron Baker, who will discuss subscription models. Let's go to that interview now.
Welcome to the Spotlight edition of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Louie Prosperi, and for this episode, I will be joined by Ron Baker, the world-renowned educator, public speaker, and top-selling author who has published 7 books such as Professional's Guide to Value Pricing, The Firm of the Future, Pricing on Purpose, Measure What Matters to Customers, Mind Over Matter, Implementing Value Pricing, a Radical Business Model for Professional Firms, and The Soul of Enterprise, Dialogues on Business in the Knowledge Economy. Ron is also a radio talk show host of The Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy, that is going on its 8th year on voiceamerica.com. I had the pleasure of getting to know Ron when I was the CEO of the Certified Professional Bookkeepers Organization of Canada. He was our keynote speaker at our first national conference, introducing our audience to value-based pricing. From there, we worked on a great project called the Black Swan Program, and in my opinion, launched and introduced value pricing to the Canadian bookkeeping and accounting market. Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Louie. I'm honored to be your first guest.
Yes, I am taking over this segment for Michael Palmer, and this is my first recording, so I'm pretty excited too.
Awesome.
So, Ron, we recently connected again at Scaling New Heights in Orlando, Florida in June, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was probably the launch of your new business model for the professional bookkeeping and accounting firms, which is based on your new book that's coming out in November. What's the title of the new book?
It's called Time's Up, the Subscription Business Model for Professional Firms.
Great. Could you talk a bit about why you believe strongly that this is the ideal model for bookkeeping and accounting professional firms going forward?
Sure. For one thing, the subscription economy is projected to grow to $1.5 trillion by 2025. It was $650 billion in 2020, just to give you some context. So it's going to double. It's been experiencing for the last 10 years compound annual growth of 17.5% compared to 3.8% for the S&P 500. It grew during COVID. Churn rates declined during COVID, which is really interesting. They're even declining as we come out of COVID. So I just think what makes this model so brilliant is that it puts the relationship at the center of the business model. So we're no longer monetizing transactions, and we're starting to nurture and grow that relationship. And I think that's what's key, and that's what excites me about it. Finally, we have a business model that matches our rhetoric. We always talk about how important the relationship is in accounting, and it is. But when you analyze our business model, what are we monetizing? We're monetizing transactions. We're monetizing scope of work. I think we seriously need to move away from that.
And the traditional method is monetizing time rather than skill or experience or outcomes, right? Let's be honest, right? So the value-based pricing is scope and value, but the industry still has a strong component of monetizing the time inputs. Right.
Right. And the scope, everything is driven by scope, and we're paranoid if things go out of scope or the customer grows and it's going to take us more time to do the books or whatever it is. And it's just such a myopic view of the value of the lifetime value of the relationship. And that's why I think we need to get away from this idea of pricing the customer. Now, pricing the customer is what I taught people do with value pricing. But in the subscription model, you're pricing the relationship. And it sounds like a semantic difference, but it's not. It's actually key, because it's not driven on relationships. It's driven on taking care of them, access to you for your expertise, all of those things that don't necessarily mean that we have to pile services brick by brick to generate value. Sometimes removing services adds more value, actually.
So that's interesting. It actually kind of goes into my next question, but the interesting thing that you said was scope, because scope is actually part of all the other models, if I believe correctly. Even value-based pricing is got a scope component. It might be outcome scope, but it's still scope component. And you're saying with the subscription-based model, technically scope, or at least scope per customer, is no longer relevant or key.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I'm not ready to go to irrelevant, because I think you can still have pricing tiers, so you can still offer options. But the language I would change would be, from change order, or some firms call it a change request, to thinking about covered, not covered. So, for instance, just take a simple example. If your firm offers bookkeeping and tax, you might have a plan just to do the books. Correct. But if they want tax coverage, they have to step up to the next option. But here's the difference, Louie, between that and value pricing. When you step up to the tax coverage tier, you're covered for everything that the firm is capable of doing within the tax banner. So if you do IRS audits or audit defense or things like that, and the customer gets audited, then they're covered. Now, that's going to depend, obviously, on a firm's level of expertise and what services they offer. But when you cover somebody for an area, they're fully covered in that area. There's no more scope of work trying to divvy it up to services. It's whatever they need whenever they need it.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. It's that time of year again, and after a great showing in 2021, the Successful Bookkeeper Summit returns even bigger and better. It's a 2-day virtual conference that features incredible speakers from the bookkeeping, accounting, and business worlds, such as value pricing expert Ron Baker and Joe Woodard of the Woodard Group. And that's just to name a few. The theme of this year's event is Make It Grow. And there's no doubt the content you'll consume will help you achieve more success than you ever thought possible. It all begins on November 9th, 2022. To secure your free spot, visit thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/summit. And again, that's thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/summit. Register today, and I'll see you at the summit. And now, let's get back to our interview.
The best way I could think of that is when we're talking about a car. Bumper to bumper coverage means everything. So when you talk about bookkeeping services, in a subscription-based model, it's literally bumper-to-bumper bookkeeping services. And if you go to the tax side and add tax, is bumper-to-bumper tax. Now, it's relevant to the skill sets within the firm, right?
Right.
But
the constraint,
yeah,
basically.
right. But that could be detailed in things that they just can't do. So that brings up to my next question. What are the key factors that makes this model superior to all the other ones in the mainstream? And let's define some of the mainstream ones. The number one, which is still pretty dominant, is what we call time billing or pricing by time. The second one is fixed. And then the third one, which is where me and you have lived for the last, you've lived there longer, but for the last 10 years, I've lived in value-based models. What makes this one more superior? What are the factors that you think that this is heads over heels over the others?
I think it puts the relationship at the center rather than transactions and scope. So and that's key because, again, we've been paying lip service to the relationship for decades in the profession. But when you, again, look at what we monetize, we're monetizing the transactions, whether it's hourly or value pricing. And so this just blows that apart. The other thing it does that I think is really key is it bakes innovation in. You have to constantly, what Walt Disney would say, plus your offering. He called it plussing the park experience, making it constantly better. There's a story of Walt when he wanted to do a Christmas parade, and his executives kind of battled him on that. They said, this is going to cost a fortune. It's not going to bring anybody to the park. And he just got really upset and said, listen, we've got to constantly plus this experience and give people a great experience, give them something that's unexpected. And that's what's going to bring them back to the park. And then he went on this tirade about, do you know how much it costs to get a new customer versus having somebody return and all of this? And the subscription model pays attention to all of that. It bakes innovation in. The other thing it does is, and I feel really passionate about this, is that if we want premium pricing, which I'm interested in as a pricer, we have to go to the market with an uncommon offering. Only uncommon offerings can command premium prices. If you go to the market with a common offering, what everybody else can do, you're going to command a common price. And by doing that bumper to bumper coverage, like you were talking about, I think that's an uncommon offering. I don't think it's comparable to a firm that's charging by the hour or charging a fixed price for a defined scope of work, because there's an insurance component in there that says, if you get audited or something happens that you need us, you're covered. Don't worry about it. So it gives the customer peace of mind. It gives the customer convenience, and it surfaces simplicity. It makes the customer experience as seamless and painless as Amazon One Click. And let's face it, we're being compared to Amazon One Click. I promise firms out there, when your customers visit your portal or they interact with you digitally, they're comparing you to Amazon. And that's probably for most firms not a very flattering comparison. We just have to up our game. This model forces us to up our game. So I think all those factors go into why I think it's superior.
Well, you've actually packed a lot in those couple of minutes, to be quite honest, Ron. So one of the things that you talked about, which is plussing, and what's interesting about subscription-based modeling and innovation. So plussing and innovation is something that, I'm going to be quite frank, is probably foreign in our industry, in the accounting and bookkeeping industry, because the innovation from our perspective, when we think about innovation, is the software and the automation components of what we use. I don't think you're thinking about that in that way, are you? When you say innovation, that's not where you're coming from. Is that correct?
No, I think innovation is much broader than just the technology. I mean, certainly technology and making new apps available and things like that for your customers is a good thing, but it's also just kind of a table stake. I'm talking more about the customer experience. The model itself is innovative. which I think is a big part of innovation, is how the customer experiences the firm and how it interacts with it. Innovation can even be in our language that we use. Just like Walt Disney didn't call his people staff. He called them cast members because Disneyland was a show and they were on stage or off stage or backstage. He called his customers guests. And that language persists to this day throughout all the Disney parks. It's a big part of their culture, and it's a big part of their attitude about creating happiness. And so I think innovation can be even the little things that make an oversized impact on the customer experience.
So, and plussing. You brought in plussing as a critical thing. What's interesting about the plussing, the way you were talking about it, it's dynamic plussing. That means that, if I understand you correctly, is the innovation in plussing, your fee might stay static, but the services will always continue to change and improve to still command that same premium price. Is that correct? Is that what we're focusing on? Because it doesn't automatically mean that your price goes up all the time.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to understand that, right?
That's exactly right. If you look at Amazon, if you look at Netflix or other subscription type businesses, they're constantly adding content. They're constantly opening up new benefits. Amazon, music and magazines and other benefits that they give their Prime members. And notice that your price doesn't change when that happens. In other words, there's no correlation between the price and what is available to the customer. But what is available to the customer is constantly expanding. And I think that's a key point, because when you constantly expand the value, even if the customer's not using it, they know it's there, they know they can use it in the future, and it kind of puts a halo of value over everything else that you do cover. And the other thing that I really like about the subscription model is once that pricing decision has been made to subscribe to the firm, price is kind of off the table, and it's not really revisited until maybe you have a price increase. And there's ways to do that are very strategic. But the point is that the customer has to take some type of action to get out of that relationship. They have to cancel. Now, unless something goes catastrophically wrong with the customer experience or the service level, they're not going to cancel. So it takes the price away from the interactions. And even with value pricing, we had to meet the customer every year and renegotiate or rediscuss the new fixed price agreement coming up.
Right.
With subscription, you don't have to do that. It's off the table, which I think is great.
It's off the table per customer, but it's not off the table for because if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, your premium price value goes down if you don't continue to do plussing or innovate. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So the value, if it's $1,000 a month product and you haven't changed it for 12 to 18 months, the value to the customer is probably no longer $1,000 a month. I think, does that make sense? Is that where you're coming from?
It does. You do have to continuously dynamically plus it, but it doesn't have to be necessarily the services. Now, sure, you could use a different app, you could use different technology, but you could also add a CEO roundtable discussion. Right. And invite them into that. You could do a book of the month club or a book of the quarter club or something. I mean, there's lots of other things that we can do to share and spread our knowledge and that of our customers, by the way, our social capital, that don't require us to perform more services. And this is part of the mind shift change, I think, that comes with subscription. It's not about adding services brick by brick by brick by brick, which is why when we say you're in our tax category, you're covered bumper to bumper. We're not trying to pile services on you. We're saying whatever we can handle in tax that you need, we're covered. And if you need something that we can't do, like an R&D credit or whatever it might be that you don't do, we'll find somebody. We have a social network and we know experts. It's kind of like the medical profession. When I go to my GP and he says you need a cardiac surgeon, right, he's probably going to give me a couple names that he trusts and respects, and then quarterback that relationship. And we can do the same thing with lawyers, insurance brokers, financial planners, all those types of things. And I think that really makes for a comprehensive client experience that's much better.
So I agree with you. Professional firms, or what we call knowledge-based firms, like accountants, lawyers, and others very similar professional bookkeeper firms and professional bookkeepers, it's all about the relationship, right? At the end of the day, your customer's engaging in a relationship format. The funny thing is we treat it as a transactional or a service-based, but the customer doesn't treat us as a service. They're treating us more relationship-based. So if I understand correctly, relationship-based is how we perceive ourselves with our customer base. Is a relationship-based model and a subscription-based model the same thing?
That's a really good question. I think it can be if it's structured right. One of the things that we're starting to see now that we're out there talking about this is firms will come up to me all the time and say, "Oh, I do subscription." And when you really dig into the details, what they've done is they've given a fixed price and they've divided it by 12 and maybe set the customer up on an ACH or something so they get paid monthly. That's not subscription because it's not taking into account the plussing, the baked in innovation, the surfacing simplicity, the whole bumper to bumper type coverage. So no, I think we can, and we have been talking like we've been relationship based for decades. But again, you've got to look at what you're monetizing. And this is the revenue model question, Louie. And I think it's a really profound one. What do we want our customers to pay us for? Now, that's not a pricing question. Pricing question would be, how much do we want our customers to pay us?
Right.
This is a revenue model question. What do we want our customers to pay us for? I don't want our customers anymore to pay us for services. I don't, because stacking up services, again, brick by brick, doesn't create more value. I want customers to pay us for peace of mind and access and convenience and simplicity and knowing that they're in good hands. So a form of insurance. We're covering them for whatever they need, giving them that peace of mind. And I think another big idea that I can throw in here is if we really want to get to the top of the value curve, we can provide transformations to our customers. And again, this is part of innovating the language because we don't use this language. But when we move customers from where they are to where they want to be, some desired future state, that's a transformation. That's personal. It's highly effectual. It's very bespoke. It's customized to them. And you're actually changing the customer. And so when you offer transformations, the customer is the product. And that takes all the emphasis away from stacking services. And I think that's profound. It's a profound idea because bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs, we're all capable of helping our customers transform, help grow their business, help retire sooner, help get their kids in college, help them buy their dream home, their dream second home, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Those are transformations. And boy, when you focus on transformations, then I think you're at the top of the value curve. And we can perform those on a serial basis. We can go from one to the next. And so I think that becomes a new KPI is how many transformations did you provide for your customer?
That's an interesting thing because I think they're already doing that, but it's whether or not we track it. Because focused on the service, you're not tracking that component. In fact, if I understand correctly, with regards to the subscription-based model now, because the subscription-based model is not based on the individual, it's based on the portfolio or the entire group, correct? So how do you take the entire group and bring it down to the individual transformation? Can you still have an individual transformation in a subscription-based model? Can it go down to that level?
Yes, you can do personalized, customized transformations for one customer at a time.
Right.
And that would be the similarity between subscription and value pricing, and some of the principles of value pricing can still apply.
Right.
But it's just that now we're pricing across an entire portfolio. So what we used to call menu pricing in value pricing, where the price would be the same for everybody, because one of the frequent questions you get is, should I post my prices on my website?
Right.
Well, if you're a subscription-based business, maybe. It's very possible you could post your prices on your website. You could have one offer, two offer, three offers. I've even started to change my thinking on that. I don't think it has to always be three. I think it can be two. I think it could even be one, because we have some empirical evidence that this works. But the bigger point is that the pricing is kind of evened out in the portfolio. You recognize when you have a portfolio of customers, some are going to use you more, some are going to get audited, most aren't. Those types of things. So you're kind of taking into account not the math of the moment of servicing the customer, but the lifetime value. And the other thing to say about the portfolio, and this is really key, because this even comes before you start planning your pricing, is you've really got to get your strategy and your positioning well defined. I think professional firms, in fact, I think all businesses, are defined by the services they don't offer and the customers they don't have. And the more defined your strategy is, and that means making trade-offs and choices, and it's really about what you're not doing. Strategy is all about what you don't do. And so many firms are afraid to turn away any dollar.
Right.
Never met a billable hour I didn't like, never met a customer I didn't
Yeah.
like. Well,
Yeah,
you got
I've
to
heard
do
that
that
many times. Yes.
strategy.
Yeah.
And so if you're niched, if you're highly niched, I think subscription is a little bit easier to do. But even if you're not niched, I don't think that bars you from doing subscription. I just think it becomes easier. But that's true no matter what your business model is, no matter what your pricing strategy is. If you're niched, it's much easier to price, period. I mean, I'd much rather be a pricer for Apple, who has less than 100 SKUs, than Hewlett Packard, that has over 15,000 SKUs. And I mean, just that one statistic alone should prove that focus can be incredibly powerful. People usually equate focus with narrow and small. And I think, well, Apple, Starbucks, they're not exactly small,
So
but they are focused.
Ron, that's an interesting concept. Here's my question, which I'm not sure if this makes sense, but Apple, are they, even though they're not subscription based, but do they have a relationship business model, or are they product based? Because Apple is, people tie into Apple at more of a relationship.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And Apple right now gets about 18-20% of its revenue from subscription. So things like Apple TV and Apple Music and iCloud storage and other services that they've been offering on a subscription basis. What they're flirting with, Louie, and I don't know where they are with this. Apple's a very secretive company.
True.
But there was an article earlier this year that said Apple is thinking about providing its hardware on a subscription basis. Now, my question for 3 years has been, why can't I subscribe to Apple? And if you think about that, it would make so much sense. They could have a student package. They could have a road warrior package. They could have a family package where you get, so many iPads, so many laptops, so many phones, and you just pay them a monthly subscription. And then when the new technology comes out, that's the plussing in their model. You just swap out. It just becomes very easy. I would subscribe to Apple in a heartbeat. And when you think about that, that's really cool. Right now, I can subscribe to Porsche. I can join the Porsche Drive program, pay $3,500 a month, and I can get access to a fleet of 7 different Porsche models. And, I can change them out every day. I call them up and say, hey, I need an SUV. They come, white glove me out an SUV, take my convertible away. And people say, well, how's that different than buying a car or leasing the car? It's not tied to the car. You're subscribed to Porsche. That's a direct relationship with Porsche, the manufacturer. And that's awesome because now Porsche knows where I drive. They know my entertainment likes. They know a lot of things about me that they can probably monetize down the road by offering other things. But the point is that 80% of the people that have signed up for Porsche Drive are new to the brand. And my question is, what are they going to be driving for the rest of their lives? Probably Porsche.
Yeah, because once they made the decision at $3,500 a month to have access to the entire line of what's there now and what's coming up, once they made that decision model, that's never part of their conversation again, right?
That's right.
They've already factored in that into their budget or their however they've determined their costing. So you're absolutely right. Once they made that decision, the likelihood of them switching means that they would have to not like the cars or something has to go wrong, I guess, at the end of the day for them to move on, right? So that is and it's the funny thing is because the accountants have the same issue. Once the relationship is 90% of the issue is relationship based, right? So if you eliminate the pricing component and focus on the relationship, the likelihood of you losing a customer for a professional firm goes down dramatically, right? Because the pricing, once that's taken care of, it's all about the relationship. So that's really cool. I love that analogy. That makes a lot of sense to me. So here's my next question. People are listening to us. They probably heard subscription-based modeling from you, and they're probably going to hear more about it coming up. What are some of the hurdles for these professionals? And there are hurdles with regards to what I call mindset changes. What do they have to do to change, to adopt and embrace a subscription model? Like what do they need to do before they even consider changing?
Yeah, like moving from hourly to value pricing,
Correct.
There's some unlearning that needs to happen. If you just look at a subscription-based income statement, it's completely different. It starts with annual recurring revenue. It subtracts out what subscription model calls churn, the customers and revenue of those customers that you lost. And then it adds new recurring revenue added during the period. And it ends, the bottom line is actually ending annual recurring revenue. And that whole focus is just completely different. It takes it away from the math of the moment. It takes away from the concept of matching. And so GAAP is not really well designed to handle subscription accounting. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and with GAAP, it's just not equipped to do it because GAAP is all about matching, and none of that kind of matters in subscription. Because how can I match services that I don't know if I'm going to be providing, and how can I recognize revenue if I don't provide services for a given month? And
right.
All those issues come up in GAAP, but they're just completely irrelevant and distractions in subscription. So that's one of the big things is you got to get your head around the accounting. You got to also get your head around customer lifetime value. We have to stop looking at the math of the moment and start looking at customer lifetime value and having a more long-term vision of what a customer is worth, because a customer can get more valuable as time goes on, because of course the acquisition cost isn't there and the cost to serve is going down because you're more familiar with them and all of those issues. And so I think that's another big one is the customer lifetime value, changing our mindset from the math of the moment. Did I make money on this hour? Did I make money on this job? Did I make money on this customer? If you look at the KPIs of a subscription business and the new income statement for the subscription business, there's no room for, customer profit, job profit, price per hour, realization. None of that matters. Those KPIs
Is there WIP? I guess there's no WIP either.
No, there's no WIP. It's all ARR, MRR, monthly recurring revenue. There is no WIP. There is no, the revenue is recognized on a monthly basis. This is part of the problems with GAAP trying to reconcile to this. But the point is that those are all big pretty big mind shift changes. I'm even finding firms that are well versed in value pricing have trouble moving away from the let's stack up services brick by brick rather than say give that bumper to bumper coverage. That's another big mind shift change. This idea that the value that we provide is provided by the number of services we offer and the scope of work. You know, the more you see on that middle tier, the more services that are offered, the more valuable it is. That's not true at all. That is not true at all. And therefore, I think that we have to really realize that our value comes from the relationship and those transformations that we were talking about earlier. And so those are some of the big mind shift changes that I think are really hard.
Here's something that we talked about this throughout the last 30 minutes or so that we've been together. So one of the things that I've noticed with subscription-based focus is access, is peace of mind, is what I need from a customer's perspective on demand. And once the price point is done, I never have to worry about that again. So those things are the things that it sounds to me what subscription-based modeling allows the customer to get or expect, right?
Yep.
Because it's no longer specific service. For example, and the service will be category, more or less, I guess it's a category-based model, where if you're going to say bookkeeping services, that's the category and everything there is included. If you add bookkeeping and tax or whatever, once you've added the category is inclusive, right?
Yep.
So and once they've got that, then basically for their perspective, it's all about these other things we just talked about. Now, from my perspective, running the firm, what performance measurements will I have to use to know if I'm doing well or not well in this model? Because I can't use the traditional things that I've done in a WIP-based firm or a time-based firm or even a value-based pricing firm, because those measurements won't be effective here. Because if I start using those, I'll get the wrong impression, won't I?
Yes. The KPIs completely change, which is normal when we change business models. Two things change. That whole pricing question, the pricing of the business changes. So Airbnb doesn't use the same pricing model as Hilton Hotels, and Uber doesn't use the same pricing model as taxi cabs. They have surge pricing and things like that. The other thing that changes that people often forget or don't even talk about with the business model innovation is the KPIs change. The internal dashboards, and subscription has well-defined KPIs. Why? Because the subscription economy has been growing. Most unicorns, those businesses valued over $1 billion, are subscription-based. Venture capitalists, angel investors have had to do a lot of work coming up with KPIs for subscription-based businesses, and they've done that. So there's some great reports out there from the famed investment firm Andreessen Horowitz that talk about KPIs in the startup phase, a more mature subscription business, the KPIs that they look at to evaluate and value a business. And they're really well done. So you got to start there. You got to start with new KPIs. I just saw from Joe Woodard sent me an email. He just got a demo on an Excel tool that tracks subscription-based KPIs.
Wow.
And they're pretty comprehensive. I have to say it was pretty interesting. So there's that, but then there's still operational KPIs that you need that have nothing to do with the accounting. You know, those leading indicators, things like turnaround time, things like the net promoter score, the number of transformations that you've provided to your customer. Those types of things are still important also to track how you're doing.
Right.
Are we keeping our promises? Turnaround time to the customer, just like FedEx measures, is really important because, that's what they want. That's what they care about is when do I get my stuff, right? And so we can still track all those things. So there are some similarities with the non-financial KPIs between what we taught in value pricing and subscription, but the financial KPIs are completely different in subscription.
Well, that's good to hear. From a value pricer that I've been mentoring and putting those things into place and promoting the fact that there is some that I can take over from one to the other. That's good to hear from my perspective. So I'm glad that I don't have to throw out everything and learn a whole new model. That's fantastic.
No, you don't. And in fact, in the book, Louie, I've got a whole chapter, a couple different chapters on pricing. In fact, I think there's 4 or 5 chapters on pricing. And one of them is what stays the same and then what's different between value pricing and subscription. So I detail all that. But there are some still foundational principles of value pricing that definitely apply, because they apply to all businesses, not just subscription. Right. They apply to all business. Even if you're hourly billing, you're subject to a value constraint.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, human beings determine whether they're going to do something based on value, like what they're getting for what they're paying.
Right.
Is always a value determination done. So I agree with you. The value, you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, it's am I getting more value than what I'm paying for? And that's usually the key factor, right? The profit incentive for both sides has to be in place for people to transact, right? So I agree. I have a question now. This one is going to probably, I don't think we can answer it because I don't think we have enough subscription-based modeling firms out there yet. But you know how we value practices, CPA firms, accounting firms, bookkeeping firms. It's usually a ratio of revenue, top line revenue. And it's a 1.2 or 1.5 or whatever it is. It rarely goes over 2 to 1. And now subscription-based modeling doesn't look at the 1 year revenue base. You're talking about lifetime value or lifetime revenue per customer, and then you blow it out through the portfolio. So does this change as more and more companies, or let's say firms, adopt a value-based or a subscription-based model? They would have to be valued completely different, no?
Yes. And we're already seeing this. There's enough empirical evidence out there that the markets and the venture capitalists value subscription-based businesses more than transactional-based businesses because they have that annual recurring revenue. It's more predictable. It's better. It's usually better cash flow. And so because it's more predictable and it's going to be more valuable. So you're right. We don't have a lot of empirical evidence yet in terms of accounting firms and bookkeeping firms who are pure subscription, the way that you and I are here talking about it. But there are some numbers starting to roll in. In fact, I just listened to a podcast. The podcast is called Humanize the Numbers. It's Paul Shrimpling out of the UK, and he just had on the Canadian expert John Warrilow. Now, John Warrilow has written many books, but 2 of them I'm going to mention because they're relevant here. One is called The Automatic Customer, and that's his book on subscription, which he's a big fan of. But the other thing he's well known for is his book Built to Sell. It's all about building a business that you can sell. And he's got a value builder program. And so he's got data on 70,000 companies that have sold. And he recounts a couple stories in this podcast interview that were fascinating. One was a gal who built a business in Texas who did payroll for au pairs. And, home employee payrolls is, I don't know how it is in Canada, Louis, but it's a pain here. Okay. There's a lot of compliance, blah, blah, blah. And she built this business and she really stuck to her knitting. He talks about her, not trying to expand to other services, just sticking to what she did. It was slower growth. But when she sold it, I believe if I remember the numbers right, she had a $6 million top line and she sold it for $54 million.
If my math is correct, that's more than a 2 to 1 multiple on top line revenue.
Yeah, it might have been a $9 million top line and a $52 million sale, but it was something like that.
It doesn't matter.
4 or 5 multiple. Yeah,
let's put it this way. Because the reason why I brought that up is because I'm going to be quite frank with professional firms, accounting firms, or bookkeeping firms. I think the highest motivator to convert would be to change that multiple. So, because I brought that up to a person that I was saying that I'm looking into working and understanding the subscription-based model and start developing it and try to implement it in firms that I coach and help out. And he said, that's interesting, but he wasn't too interested until I started saying, well, if you implement the right model, your multiple could be 3, 4, 5 to 1. And all of a sudden now he's more interested. So
Yeah.
I think this is a good place to end for our audience, is that the subscription-based model for our industry is brand new. Ron has written a book and it's coming out in November. Is that correct?
Yes, I think its official launch is either the 19th or the 20th. And I can give you a link where people can get if you pre-order the book, you can get an offer. Me and the co-author, Paul Dunn, are going to do a virtual book launch around November when the book comes out. And we're going to, go on Zoom or something and have a virtual meeting. People can ask questions. And then we're going to do another one after people have had a chance to read the book and maybe pile up questions. Then we'll take questions at the second launch. And they also get a trial period offering to our Patreon member for my radio show, The Soul of Enterprise. And you can find details on that offer. All you have to do is pre-order the book and email the receipt to us. Take a screenshot of Amazon or whatever. And you can learn about this offer at thesoulofenterprise.com/timesup. And you'll see all the details there.
Perfect. I got to be honest with you, Ron. I think if we can indicate to people, if they convert their practice to a subscription-based model, their rate of return is a higher multiple, that might help us convince more accountants to do this and more bookkeepers to do this, because the number one thing that professionals in our industry are, and I know you're a recovering cost accountant, and you're trying to make up for that, is that we love our customers, we want to help them, and as a professional, we really focus on the relationship. We kind of get lost in the service component because of the trying to bill it and so forth. And if you change the model to subscription, once you've established the price point and track it properly, you can then refocus all your energy on the relationship. And I love the plussing. That's a new word for me. I'm going to start using it. So I love plussing. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank Walt Disney for that. But you're right, Louie. You will get a higher multiple when you sell. But I would also like to point out, because I'm a pricer and I still have pricing in it running through my DNA, is I'm also trying to get your premium pricing power. And so I think you can throw off a higher profit year by year as well by commanding a higher price. And I also think you can do it with less customers. And that's something we didn't touch on, but less customers is an important component of this, because you always need spare capacity to deal with things that customers need on demand. And you can easily handle that if you have spare capacity.
That was great, Ron. Like I said, I think we could probably talk on this for another hour or two.
Well, I think we're going to, Louie, aren't we?
Yeah, we went a little over. But I find this topic fascinating. And I know we've talked many times, and getting the two of us together, we're never going to hit the right targets. We're always going to go over. But what I'd like to say is, if you could let everybody know, because I know you also do a lot of public speaking and you're in a lot of events, and I know people would like to see you, that thank God that COVID's over. If you could tell people where you're going to be, where you're going to speak over the next little while. Also, some information, repeat the information related to the book and how they can reach you. That would be great.
Excellent. Well, I'll start with how they can get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm one of the LinkedIn influencers, so you can see me there. I've got over 100 blog posts of articles and podcast interviews I've done on subscription and other topics. So you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at Ronald Baker. You can also email me at ron@verisage.com. And then I am speaking at AICPA Digital Conference this year in December, and that's going to be in Austin, Texas from the 4th to the 7th. I'm actually doing a pre-conference talk, which is, I think, 4 hours on the subscription business model on December 5th. I'm also trying to get into QBC, and that's either going to be December 8th or 9th. So I'll be doing that. I'm also speaking at a RootWorks conference. If you know Darren Root, I'll be speaking at his Inspire conference in December, on December 1st. So I'll be out there talking about the book once it comes out. And then for more information on how you can get involved with pre-ordering the book and then getting access and invitations to our virtual conference that me and Paul Dunn will be conducting, and then also getting a trial period for the Patreon membership of my radio show that I do with Ed Kless. And Patreon gets you commercial-free episodes of the show. And you can go to thesoulofenterprise.com/timesUp. So that's thesoulofenterprise.com/timesUp. And that'll give you the instructions on how to pre-order the book, send us the receipt, and then we'll get your name on the list and make sure you get to come to the virtual conference where you get to talk to us. And we're going to hold 2 of those. So one when the book comes out in November, and then another one probably in February or March the following year, to give you a chance to read the book and then pile up some questions for us, and we can have a discussion.
Well, that's great. And we haven't confirmed yet, but I think you missed one. You will be coming to be a key speaker at the Successful Bookkeeper Global Conference. It's coming up in November, but that's okay.
You're right. I did forget about that. I was just looking at December. I should have looked at November, but yes, I will be doing that as well.
And by the way, that's okay, because Ron and I just talked about it about 10 minutes ago before we launched this podcast. So it's okay. It all works out because we haven't worked out the details yet. So it's all good. Ron, we would love to have you back again, and I'm looking forward to it, seeing you. And if there's a way for me to come to any of these speaking events, I will definitely be there as well.
Awesome.
So thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you, Louie.
That was Louie Prosperi and Ron Baker, 2 amazing thought leaders in our industry, and I know this information is going to be very valuable to your bottom line in the future. As I mentioned, Louie will be taking the lead on the Thursday Spotlight episodes. You're in good hands as we aim to bring you more valuable content during your week. So keep an eye out for these as they come up. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.